Bucknuts. It is Thursday, June 29th, 2017. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change, obviously coming to you a little later than usual. That is for good reason. It is Thursday. It is Steve Wiltfong, Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports. But Steve is on assignment out in Beaveron, Oregon at Nike's headquarters for the opening, hence the 3-hour delay, so Steve gets some beauty sleep. Steve, it's a fine day in the Gem City. How about the weather around Nike headquarters?
Good morning, Daniel. I haven't peeked outside yet, but I think that it's going to be in the 70s today. So excited to get out there and see some of the best high school football prospects in the country competing. And when you say that, that means a lot of Buckeyes targets.
Let's get to the important stuff first. Do you have a setup to get a smoothie this morning?
I recall a smoothie joint being on the way to the Nike headquarters, but I'm not sure if that's in the cards today for me. But I know that this place that we're staying at has a legit breakfast buffet, so excited to get down there and tear into that. As it's 10:16 belly time right now, but 7:16 here and haven't left the room yet.
Good to hear. Like you said, obviously, we've talked about this all week. The opening, like major football events like the NFL Draft, Signing Day, turns into a Buckeye extravaganza. So far, only the receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends have reported, though there are a litany of Buckeye targets and commitments among that group. Can you run down for us the guys you've seen so far that are going to be Buckeyes and how they look and if they pass the Steve Wiltfong eye test?
Well, I'll tell you what, before we jump into the usual suspects, Luke Ford's a guy that we haven't talked about enough in the Ohio State world, and that's because Jeremy Ruckert is the number one tight end in the country, and he's a guy that everyone sees ultimately being in Ohio State's class, and he's going to make a decision this summer, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did it at Friday Night Lights. And he talked about Urban Meyer. He was one of the several guys that talked about Urban Meyer a lot yesterday. But Luke Ford's a guy that Kevin Wilson's been keeping warm, and he checks in as the nation's number 4 tight end per the 24/7 Sports Composite. 6'6", 250 pounds, and it's definitely a tight end body, not a guy that's going to grow into a tackle. He was the most pretty specimen to walk in to check in yesterday, and he's a guy who the Luke Ford camp always mentions Ohio State. Ohio State's in regular contact with him. And if something were to go wrong with Ruckert, I could see things really pick up with Luke Ford. And hell, if he's good enough, and Ohio State has him in a spot where we can't pass on taking a guy of this caliber, perhaps maybe they would even take 2. I think Luke Ford's got a chance to be that good. But Jeremy Ruckert, Blue Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown just continues to impress physically every time I see him. He's not going to blow you away with height, 5'11", 6 foot, but he is an absolutely rocked up specimen of a receiver. His dad was a Mr. Universe that has created his own protein powder, so he knows how to get after it in the weight room. And I think he's the best high school receiver in the country right now. That doesn't mean I think he's the best receiver prospect as far as what he's going to blossom into when he's 22, but I do think he's pretty special. I think he's the best high school receiver in the country. He talked highly of the Buckeyes. Blue Smith continues to be an Ohio State Kentucky battle, says he tucks with Urban Meyer every day. And Brennan Eagles is a freakish athlete receiver out of Texas, a 5-star for the 24/7 Sports Composite. He says he'll take an official visit to Ohio State, 6'3", 214 pounds, kind of compared himself to being in the same mold as the Michael Thomas, and he's in regular contact with Zach Smith as well. So those are the 5 guys that talked about Ohio State the most yesterday.
Couple things. Blue Smith, obviously the first question everyone wants to know, what does he look like, a tight end or a receiver? And then after that, St. Brown hasn't been a guy we've talked about a lot, but there's been some crystal ball activity on him. You may think he's headed elsewhere. Bring us up to speed on what Blue looked like, and a little more on Brown's recruiting. St. Brown, excuse me.
Well, I'm in the boat that thinks that Blue long-term is a tight end as well. And so obviously you got Ohio State pursuing Blue and Jeremy Ruckert, and both are takes, obviously, for the Buckeyes. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, he hasn't even visited Ohio State yet. The Buckeyes are doing a hell of a job recruiting him, but I think that's a projection pick by anyone that's forecasting him to Ohio State, maybe trying to get ahead of the curve. I think Stanford leads for him right now. He was back at Stanford earlier this week with his teammate JT Daniels, the five-star quarterback. I think JT is going to end up at Stanford. Amon-Ra's middle brother, Osiris, signed with Stanford in the last class. His oldest brother's at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's in the mix there. Michigan's in the mix. USC. Amon-Ra was at Michigan or at USC again recently. So it would be tough for me to say he's going to go to Ohio State right now. Could that change with the visit in the fall? Certainly. But right now, I feel good about Stanford for Amon-Ra St. Brown right now.
Before we get to the guys, the Buckeyes coming later this weekend, the Buckeye targets coming later this week. When we were chatting a little bit before the show, you said there was a definite theme among those to check in yesterday. There was a name that kind of was mentioned more than the others.
Well, at least with the guys that checked in yesterday, no head coach is working harder on the trail than Urban Meyer. I'll say Willie Taggart has been getting a lot of love from recruits as well, the new Oregon coach out of USF, and Oregon's got the nation's number 5 recruiting class and a lot of blue chippers and the West Coast best considering the Ducks. But, as recruiting keeps evolving, Urban Meyer, just his motor and his attention to staying in contact with their top targets, there isn't a head coach in college football that seems to be on top of the priority recruits as Urban Meyer is, and his net is huge. I mean, he's not just locked in on 12 or 13 guys. You're talking about a guy like Brennan Eagles who's committing in a couple weeks, and everyone expects it to be Texas. Now he's still going to take official visits. You got Urban Meyer swinging with him. I have a feeling when the nation's number 1 corner, Patrick Surtain, walks in here on Friday, he's going to say that he's in regular dialogue with Urban Meyer. And I think it's just impressive how much time he puts into recruiting while also still being the CEO of a football team that's competing for titles year in and year out.
Okay, let us know who we should be watching for the next few days. If it's future Buckeyes, if it's Buckeye commitments, guys you're expecting a lot from at the opening are ones who could really improve their profile.
Well, I think that, from Ohio State storylines, you're going to, it's going to start with Micah Parsons and where do things stand with the nation's number 1 weak side defensive end, fresh off a visit to Nebraska. I'm interested in asking Anthony Cook what's stopping the 5-star corner from committing to the Buckeyes. Zach Harrison, the number 1 player in Ohio in 2019, 24/7 Sports number 3 player in the country. He's out here as one of the few juniors, another junior that's out here, Devontae Dobbs. I have him crystal ball to the Buckeyes as well already. I mean, Bill, there's 166 kids out here, and I would say 40 of them have Ohio State near the top of the list. So we could, the rundown here would be long. The show would take forever.
Do you and Bill Kurlick have plans to go to the local strip clubs tonight, as Bill likes to do on all his trips?
Is that what he likes to do? See, I never see Bill after work hours on these trips, and I was wondering where he goes.
Because he's in his hotel room working.
Does he send in receipts?
Bill orders cheeseburgers with no cheese. Bill weighs the same he weighed.
That's called a hamburger.
In high school. I know. That's a good kind of part of the joke. It's called Kurlick style. It's burger and bun,
right?
baby. No ketchup. Burger and bun, dude. Ketchup's fattening. But I digress. So I want to get back a little bit to the Blue thing. You said Blue, you think he's going to be a tight end? I saw some video of Blue before he left. He looks pretty thin to me. So you're basing it just on height. So from the eye test there, you still think tight end?
I just think that's where he'll create the matchup problems on the next level. Certainly as a sophomore playing with Messiah DeWeaver, he had an outstanding year and certainly flashed as a receiver. But as his body continues to develop, unless he comes down here and posts some testing numbers that change my mind, I think that he'll be better served on the next level creating matchup problems with how defenses choose to match up with him as a tight end compared to being a receiver.
Okay, let's finish with this. What's on the docket for today there? What are the events we can hope to see coverage from as you and Bill canvas with the rest of the 24/7 staff, the Nike headquarters campus?
Yeah, so we get one workout today. Quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends on the field running routes on air. So, that's we'll be seeing quarterbacks and if they're throwing consistent spirals and being accurate, and receivers and what kind of route runners they are, and if they're natural catching the football. It'll be a pretty low key workout. The real competition starts Saturday, and 7-on-7 play Sunday and Monday.
There you have it. We have Steve Wiltfong and Bill Kurlick there with bells on. You will not get better coverage of the opening anywhere. Keep it locked in here, Bucknutters. We appreciate Steve working on West Coast time.